Today, we are really pleased to have Dianne Ferris, who is the Senior Quality and Compliance Manager at Continuous Quality Improvement, which is a division within Research Compliance Office at Stanford. She has joined Stanford in this role since 2018 and conducts various quality and compliance reviews within the IRB, as well as external consent form audits and compliance reviews. Dianne earned her master's degree in pharmacology and toxicology from Dartmouth Medical School with a focus on carcinogenesis and growth factor signaling. After graduating, she worked for Dartmouth's IRB office for 6 years as a senior IRB analyst, and then she moved to their cancer center at their regulatory and compliance officer. Dianne has a special interest and expertise in writing consent forms and conducting effective consent discussions, and has presented on this topic at various conferences around the country. And thank you so much, Dianne, for your time in joining us and presenting this wonderful topic. And we have Allison Gerger here as well with us. She is a program development lead for the Research Compliance Office. She leads the Continuous Quality Improvement Division, which is responsible for designing, overseeing, and implementing a program to evaluate, track, and monitor the effectiveness of the Stanford Research Compliance Office to ensure the rights and welfare of research subjects and compliance with applicable laws. She earned her Bachelor's of Science degree in biology from Gannon University, Master of Public Health in Epidemiology from University of Pittsburgh, and a registered nurse license from Community College of Allegheny County. Allison has over 15 years of combined experience in research administration, and research compliance. Again, thank you so much, Allison, for your time, for being here and presenting at our GCP workshop. And I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us. And without further delay, I will begin the presentation. One moment while I get this set up. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see the screen and see the slides.
Yep, looks good, Dianne.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. As Susan introduced, my name is Dianne Ferris, and I am a Senior Compliance Manager for the Research Compliance Office here at Stanford University. My colleague, Allison Gerger, is also with us today, and together we manage the email box, which fields general questions for the IRB, including whether projects meet the definition of human subjects research. This email address will be included later in this presentation. So today's presentation will be focused on human subjects research versus projects that do not meet the definition of human subjects research. Before we dive into the presentation, we would like to introduce you to the Continuous Quality Improvement Division, CQI for short, within the Research Compliance Office. The slide here depicts some of our activities. We currently are a team of 2 with another position to be filled. Our role within the RCO is to evaluate the IRB operations in terms of compliance with the regulations, university policies, and state and local laws, as well as the quality and consistency of IRB reviews. We also do some work for the Animal Research Panel, otherwise known as APLAC. Some of you may know us from the IRB Education Advice and Guidance inbox, We review many of the HSR determination applications, which is why we were asked to give this presentation today. So the objectives for today's presentation are to identify the regulations pertaining to human subjects research, review the definitions of research and human subjects, understand the differences and similarities between HSR and other types of investigations and projects that are not HSR. And to that end, we will go through a few case studies. We will ask you all to weigh in to see if we can apply the definitions of human subjects research to these case studies. The workshop organizer, Susan, will be helping us with these polls later in the talk. We will conclude the presentation with a review of our newly revised HSR form and quickly review how to submit an HSR determination application in eProtocol. And we'll wrap everything up by providing information about whom to contact with questions and where some of our resources are located. So before we can determine whether a project meets the definition of human subjects research, I need to provide some background information, including the purpose of the IRB and the definitions we use when making these types of determinations. The overall purpose of the IRB is to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects involved in research. To put this into practice, the IRB reviews human subjects research to ensure compliance with federal regulations, state laws, and local policies. It is important to note, on a side note, that when we are referring to Stanford in this presentation, we are referring to all affiliated organizations listed on the right side of the screen. So in order for the IRB to evaluate whether a scholarly activity is subject to IRB review or not, we first look at the definition of research provided in the regulations, which is a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. Generally speaking, a systematic investigation would involve an hypothesis as well as a detailed systematic plan to answer the hypothesis. The term contributing to generalizable knowledge is one that has been discussed and debated for years, but generally speaking, contributing to generalizable knowledge means that one can draw conclusions that are broadly applicable beyond the scope of the project itself. Determining whether a project's results will contribute to generalizable knowledge can be challenging. Sometimes it is obvious, and sometimes we need to evaluate exactly how the project data are intended to be used. More on these nuances later. On the right side of the screen, we see the definition of a human subject, which is a living individual about whom an investigator obtains information or specimens through intervention or interaction with an individual. Or a human subject may be individuals about whom the investigator obtains, uses, studies, analyzes, or generates identifiable information or specimens. More on those terms in a moment. Federal regulations outline 4 examples of projects that are not considered human subjects research. The first is scholarly and journalistic activities, such as oral history, journalism, biography, literary criticism, legal research, and historical scholarship, including the collection and use of information that focuses directly on the specific individuals about whom the information is collected. The second activity is public health surveillance activities, including the collection and testing of information or biospecimens that is conducted, supported, requested, ordered, required, or authorized by a public health authority. The third carve-out from the regulations is collection and analysis of information, biospecimens, or records by or for a criminal justice agency for activities authorized by law or court order solely for criminal justice or criminal investigative purposes. And the last type of project is authorized operational activities as determined by each agency in support of intelligence, homeland security, defense, or other national security missions. According to OHRP, the regulatory definitions of research on human subjects themselves determine the order in which these two questions must be asked. And to explain, OHRP is the Office for Human Research Protections, which is the regulatory body that oversees and enforces the federal regulations applicable to human subjects research. So as I said, first, we are to determine if the project meets the regulatory definition of research. And if it does, then we ask whether the research involves human subjects. As mentioned earlier, the definition of research contains two key phrases for consideration, those being a systematic investigation and generalizable knowledge. The definition of a human research subject is a living individual about whom an investigator obtains data or specimens. And that can be done either through direct intervention or interaction with the individual, or by otherwise obtaining data and or specimens that contain identifiable private information. Because the first element of this definition is a living individual, research with data or specimens from deceased individuals only, or cadaveric research, is not human subjects research. However, the about whom part of this definition is a very important part of the IRB's analysis. We note that it is possible to conduct research that involves interactions with individuals to collect information. But if the data collected are not about those individuals, the research may not be human subjects research. Pardon me. Looking again at the definition of a human subject, there are two ways that individuals become human research subjects. The first involves interactions or interventions with individuals, and examples of these would be surveys or interviews, biopsies or other medical procedures, focus groups, and the like. The second part of this definition involves the collection, analysis, or creation of identifiable private information. As used here, the word private is self-explanatory, but a bit more about identifiable. Individually identifiable information means either that the data includes some direct identifiers, or the identities of the individuals in the data set are readily ascertainable. So at this point, we would like to briefly review some of the definitions that pertain to the identifiability of data sets. First, as we all know, PHI is protected health information as defined by the HIPAA privacy rule, 45 CFR 164. PII is personally identifiable information, such as name, social security number, etc. Anonymous means that at no time has PII or PHI had a code assigned that would permit the data to be traced back to an individual. De-identified means an investigator cannot readily ascertain the identity of the individual, and in the case of PHI, the data has been stripped of all 18 identifiers, which we have listed on the right-hand side of the screen. Coded data means that PII has been removed and the HIPAA identifiers have been removed and replaced with a unique code, a number, letter, symbol, or any combination that allows the investigator to link the identifying information to the data or specimens if needed. As I mentioned, on the right-hand side of the slide is the list of the 18 HIPAA identifiers that must be removed for a data set to be deemed de-identified. Please note that in certain circumstances, it is possible that a data set is de-identified per HIPAA standards, but it may still include data that could identify individual subjects. For example, if the data set is relatively small and the study population is defined by having a very rare condition, it may be possible to ascertain the identity of some individuals even without the HIPAA identifiers included. When we encounter research like this, which is fairly uncommon, we recommend the investigator consults with the University Privacy Office for a more in-depth analysis of identifiability. The NIH has a helpful flowchart to use when determining whether research that involves private information or specimens is considered human subjects research or not. I highly recommend this flowchart for those investigators conducting NIH-funded research involving data or specimens only. We have included a link to this flowchart under the resources section of this presentation. So there are several other non-HSR project types that do not meet the definition of human subjects research that are not outlined in the federal regulations. When determining whether a project meets the definition of research, the IRB focuses on the intent of the project. When determining whether a project meets the definition of a human subject, the IRB focuses on living and about whom. There are a few disclaimers that we should point out here. Some human subjects research may include these other non-HSR project types as part of the overall design of the project. If so, IRB oversight may be required. Also, some of these projects may start out as not HSR, but may evolve into human subjects research. If so, IRB oversight is required. When in doubt, please contact IRB Education at stanford.edu. As we review these other non-HSR project types, please keep in mind that these projects are limited to the examples provided. The first and most common type of project that does not meet the definition of human subjects research is quality assurance or quality improvement. This is a systematic investigation to assess or promptly improve a process, program, or system, or to promptly improve performance as judged by accepted or established standards. The intent of this systematic investigation is to gather information for the purpose of improving a specific process and/or system, because the intent is not to test a hypothesis or produce generalizable knowledge. QA/QI does not meet the criteria for research. Although IRB review and approval is not needed for QA/QI projects, there are additional institutional requirements, and we have included the contact information for hospital privacy and the VA here, should your project involve the VA as well. The second type of project that does not meet the definition of human subjects research is program evaluation. This type of project is a systematic method for collecting and analyzing information to answer questions about the effectiveness and efficiency of projects or programs. The intent of program evaluation is to gather information for the purpose of improving the specific program. Because the intent is not to test a hypothesis or produce generalizable knowledge, program evaluation does not meet the definition or criteria for research. As we mentioned, often projects contain a mixture of these endeavors and thus do not fit precisely into one of the definitions we just presented. As seen here, when we examine these definitions side by side, one can immediately see the commonality in these endeavors and that they all involve a systematic investigation of some kind. And all three usually gather large amounts of data about living individuals for analysis. Sometimes the data are collected via interactions with individuals, such as, again, interviews, surveys, biopsies, or medical procedures. And sometimes they obtain private identifiable information about individuals simply in order to complete their project. However, it is the specific purpose of these projects and precisely how the investigator plans to use the resulting data that often distinguishes one type of project from another. Later in the presentation, we'll provide an example of projects that are almost identical except for the purpose and the plans for the project results. This simple Venn diagram nicely illustrates the potential overlap of these activities. And please note, if a project contains any elements of research, most of the time the entire project must be reviewed by the IRB, although there are exceptions in which the IRB would need to review only the research components. The third type of project that does not meet the definition of human subjects research are case reports or case series. These are a summary of clinical data gathered for the purposes of diagnosing and/or instruction. Typically, this involves the review of 5 or less medical records. The intent of case reports is to review clinical data for the purpose of diagnosing an individual's condition or for instructional purposes. Because the intent is not to test a hypothesis nor produce generalizable knowledge, case reports do not meet the criteria for research. Another type of project that does not meet the definition of human subjects research are interviews and surveys with professionals about their profession to better understand a particular issue or problem. Although these types of projects may meet the definition of research, they do not meet the definition of human subjects, as the data being collected is about the profession or field rather than about the individual. Think of these individuals as the conduit for which the information is collected, rather than the subject of the research. It is important to note that if the questions ascertain information about the individual, including questions that elicit opinions, feelings, etc., the project may meet the definition of human subjects research, requiring IRB oversight. For example, the IRB, in this case, has already determined that a survey project is research. And the next question we ask is whether human subjects are involved. So project number 1 on the left-hand side of the slide asks the following questions. How many beds are in the unit? How many nurses, midwives, and PAs work in the department? How often is continuing education provided? Does this survey research involve human subjects? The answer is no, because the survey is collecting only factual information and no questions pertain to to the individuals themselves, nor their opinions. For project number 2, on the right-hand side of this slide, we have the same survey, but with 3 additional questions here in bold, including how long have you worked in this unit? Do you think your department should hire more nurse supervisors or more midwives? And what is your experience with the continuing education? And so we ask the same question, does this survey research involve human subjects? And the answer is yes, because the survey is collecting information about the individuals. The final type of project that does not meet the definition of human subjects research is decedent and/or cadaveric research. This is research performed on individuals who have been declared legally dead and/or research involving the collection of tissues from deceased individuals. Although these projects may meet the definition of research, they do not meet the definition of human subjects, as the subject of the research is no longer living. Although IRB review and approval is not needed for decedent research, there are additional institutional requirements. HIPAA protections, for example, extend beyond an individual's death. You may need to contact the University Privacy Office to determine how best to obtain authorization to use and to disclose PHI from deceased individuals. And we have included the contact information of the Privacy Office here. There is a California state law that trumps the federal definition of a human subject as it relates to the use of California death records. Per the California Health and Safety Code, death files containing personal identifying information used for, quote, scientific interest are subject to federal regulations under 45 CFR 46. In other words, if a project involves California death records, it meets the definition of human subject research, and IRB oversight is required. Now we are going to put these definitions to practice. So for case study number 1, the study team proposes to analyze data from a multi-region sampling of tumors from publicly available data sets. These analyses will inform the study team's understanding of primary tumor evolution and to what extent selection is active during tumorigenesis. Does this project meet the definition of human subject research? Susan, if you could please open the first poll.
Do you see the poll?
I do.
Perfect. We see the answers trickling in. Thanks, everyone. Please put your answers in the poll. And by the way, Dianne, there are a couple of questions in the chats. Would you like to answer them as we go or keep it for the end?
We can try to answer them as we go, but if a particular question seems better for at the end or pertains to something we'll address later, then perhaps we'll hold off on that one.
Okay, Allison
Susan,
is offering to monitor the questions.
Yeah, we'll save them for the end because Diane's actually going to touch on this topic in a little bit more detail later on. So yeah, we'll address them at the end. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'll end the poll. Yeah, let's.
All right.
Yeah, I see we have not everybody has responded, but 85% responded. So should I end the poll?
That sounds good. Thank you.
And then share the results.
Great. Thank you. So this looks like about 60% of you had said no, this is not research or human subjects research. And 40% are saying yes. So let's find the answer. Okay, so the resolution for this case study is, although the project may meet the definition of research, excuse me, it does not meet the definition of a human subject, as the data are publicly available rather than private identifiable information. It is important to note when the IRB refers to publicly available data, we are referring to data that anyone could access through a minimal request process. If the request to access, quote, publicly available data requires privacy attestations or special access, the data are not considered publicly available. Okay, so moving on to case study number 2. The study team proposes to interview individuals on a series of open-ended questions designed to elicit narratives about mental health outcomes in a particular institution. This information will be used to improve services and programming provided to individuals in that particular institution. Does this project meet the definition of human subjects research? We'll give it another 5 or 10 seconds or so. Okay. I think I can end this poll on my end, so I will do that. About 81% have participated, so that's great. And sharing the results, it looks about 3/4 of you have said yes, and 1/4 have said no. Okay, so the answer is, drum roll, please. Doesn't seem like I can advance my slides. Oh, there we go. Okay, this project does not meet the definition of research. The intent of this QI project is to improve services and programs provided to individuals in that particular institution, rather than producing generalizable knowledge. So this does not meet the definition of research. So we don't move on to ask a question about human subjects because it's moot. Okay, moving on to the third case study. The study team proposes to assess the quality of automated speech transcription software to see which features are predictive of clinical improvements as measured by clinical outcome measures. This will be done by transcribing and analyzing voice prints from psychotherapy sessions. Susan, if you could open the poll again. Give it a few more seconds. About 58% or 60% of you have responded thus far. Okay. Oh, there's a couple more answers trickling in. Okay, we're at about 75, almost 80% of you who have participated. So we'll close the poll. And the results are about almost evenly split, with more people favoring no, that this does not meet the definition of human subjects research. And we'll close that. And so the answer to this one is yes, the project does meet the definition of human subjects research. This project is designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge, and there are individually identifiable voice prints, even though those voice prints may not contain PHI. However, we've pointed out here that voice prints are usually considered that 18th HIPAA identifier. Oh no, I'm sorry, voice prints are one of the actual 18 HIPAA identifiers. So this does meet the definition of human subjects research. All right, hopefully this case study will be a little more straightforward. So case study number 4, this project proposes to develop a microfluidic-based approach for real-time monitoring of physiological concentrations of insulin and/or glucagon in deceased human donor pancreatic islet samples. The information will be used to achieve greater sensitivity and specificity than current ELISA-based methods. Does this project meet the definition of human subjects research? Okay, we've got about 70% of you have responded. We'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, so we'll end the poll. And about 60% of you have said no, and 40% have said yes. And we'll find the answer here, which is this project may, this project may meet the definition of research, but it does not meet the definition of human subjects, as the samples are from deceased individuals. And so if you recall, the definition of a human subject requires that the individuals be living. Although this project does not require IRB review, it may require University Privacy Office review if the project also involves collection of private identifiable information. The HIPAA rules would apply. Okay, moving on to case study number 5. The physician identifies 2 unusual cases of COVID-19 infection. The patients presented with delirium and elevated liver enzymes. The clinical assessments did not identify an etiology of these symptoms other than co-occurring COVID-19 infection. The physician decides to write up case reports on these 2 patients and publish in a medical journal. Does this project meet the definition of human subjects research? Okay, we're at about 70% participation so far. Okay. So these results are, again, pretty even. About 52% of you have said no, and 48% have said yes. And so the answer is no. This project does not meet the definition of research. Although this is important information to disseminate in the literature, the sample size of 2 will not produce information that will contribute to generalizable knowledge. And this example underscores the notion that publishing alone does not automatically render a project HSR. Moving on to case study number 6. The study team proposes to investigate existing nutrition programs and what challenges registered dietitians face when working toward their patient education goals. This will be done by interviewing registered dietitians about their current experiences with patient education and observing in-clinic behavior. Does this project meet the definition of human subjects research? We've got about 74% have provided answers. We'll just give it one more second or two. Okay. We can close the poll. And it looks like about 2/3 of you have answered yes, this is HSR, and 35% have answered no. And the answer is yes, this project does meet the definition of human subjects research. This is research as it aims to contribute to generalizable knowledge, and the individuals being interviewed meet the definition of human subjects. All right, we've got 2 more of these. Case study number 7. The study team proposes to examine whether sodium monitoring can be safely reduced from every 6 hours to every 24 hours after pituitary surgery to improve postoperative pituitary surgery management at Stanford hospitals and clinics. This will be done via medical record review of all patients who underwent pituitary surgery from 2018 to the present. Does this project meet the definition of human subjects research? Okay. In this case, 62% of you have answered yes, and 38% have answered no. And the answer for this project, this was, in my opinion, a tricky one. The answer is no, only because the investigators intend to use the results to impact clinical care here at Stanford. They specifically stated that their goal is to improve postoperative pituitary surgery management here at SHC. The investigator is not testing a hypothesis, nor does he intend to use the data to contribute to generalizable knowledge. We should point out here that because this project does not meet the definition of research, rather it's a QA/QI endeavor, the IRB does not evaluate the data protections, privacy, HIPAA, etc., with respect to the EMR data, as the entire project is outside of our purview. As we mentioned earlier, investigators should consult with the SHC Privacy Office when conducting QI projects involving EMR data. Lastly, I alluded to this earlier. This is a project that collects a large amount of EMR data, and one could argue that the data set may yield the ability to draw generalizable conclusions. However, the investigator has no plans to conduct such analyses, so the project remains not human subjects research. Okay, our final case study. A researcher is studying the molecular structure of pancreatic cancer. She arranges to receive pancreatic tumor samples from a colleague at another institution that are left over from routine clinical procedures. The researcher will receive these samples without any identifying information, and the clinical team from the other institution who provides the samples to her will not keep track of what sample came from which patient. Therefore, there will be no link between the samples and the patients from whom they were collected. Does this project meet the definition of human subjects research? All right, we're at about 50% of you who have responded to the poll. We'll give it a couple more seconds. And then, well, we're at about 66% of you who have answered. So the results of this poll are that 32% of you had said yes, this is human subjects research, and 68% of you said no. Well, I'm glad to see those results because the answer to this is that yes, this is research, but it does not involve human subjects. And the reason that this does not meet the definition of a human subject is that the samples the investigator will receive will include no identifiers, and there is no link between the samples and the patients from whom they were collected. There is no way for the investigator to ascertain the identity of these subjects. Okay, now I'm going to briefly review how to submit to the Stanford IRB for an HSR determination in eProtocol. As of July 2021, all HSR determination applications must be submitted via eProtocol. I always explain when I speak with investigators that the application is very brief. There are only 3 screens to complete: personnel, funding, and the attachments page. Here on this slide are the general instructions. Go to your dashboard, create a protocol like you otherwise would, enter a brief title, enter personnel, at least the PD and the admin contact, which can be both if desired. Please do not worry about city training and who is eligible to be a protocol director, as these are not questions that we ask when determining whether a project needs IRB review. In your case, you would choose medical as the category and choose HSR determination as the application type. I believe that this option appears at the end of the drop-down menu after expedited and exempt towards the bottom of the list. And then you click Create the Protocol, complete the application, and attach the Human Subjects Research Determination form. You should also attach any surveys you plan to use or any data collection tools, a protocol, if applicable, or any other documents that are associated with your project. The HSR determination form comprises 95% of the application information. Aside from the personnel and funding pages, all information about the project is captured and collected in this form. The form is posted on our website in several places, and it is linked within the eProtocol application itself. It is important that this form be completed thoroughly, so I will highlight a few of the key areas and problematic sections that tend to stump investigators. Naturally, of course, the project procedures should be outlined in sufficient detail. A supplemental information or a protocol may be uploaded on the same attachment page as well. And here is where the project description and all of the procedures are supposed to be listed. Please do make sure that that is complete. More information is better than less. The information, data, and specimens section is a difficult one for investigators, given the various terms relating to study data, which are repeated here for reference. Please note there is a link circled here in red to an RCO guidance document that explains HIPAA and defines PHI. So please do consult with this guidance document when you're completing this section. It is important to list here the data elements that are or will be in the data set, and to carefully answer whether the data are de-identified or coded. By definition, data cannot be both. And if the data are de-identified or coded, we need to know whether the data source or the data recipient is doing the de-identifying or coding of those data. On page 2 of the HSR determination form, we include questions about the use of drugs or devices or in vitro diagnostic devices, known as IVDs. The FDA regulations consider research requiring IRB review to be a clinical investigation involving the use of a test article in its view as one participant. So it's necessary that we ask all these questions as well. A new feature of the form is the addition of the program evaluation definition. We hope that this provides more clarity for investigators when answering questions about what type of project they believe they are conducting. Likewise, we added the definition of case reports and case series to the form. And I note here the definition of an FDA clinical investigation is at the bottom of this form for reference. Once you submit an HSR determination application in eProtocol, the IRB reviewer may request clarifications to better understand the intent of the project, the data being collected or analyzed, or the project procedures. Upon receipt of the protocol application, the IRB review takes approximately 5 to 7 business days to conduct the initial review of the submission. At that point, clarifications or questions may be requested or asked. Once questions are resolved, or if there were no clarifications needed, there are 3 possible outcomes. Not research, which means no further action is required. The research does not involve human subjects, which means no further action is required. Or the project amounts to human subjects research that requires IRB review, in which case a protocol application must be submitted in eProtocol for review, such as exempt, expedited, or regular. It is important to note that letters are not issued for HSR protocol applications, as the IRB is making a determination rather than approving these types of research. If you need documentation of the determination, the eProtocol application, which includes the IRB's determination, as well as the regulatory citation applicable, can be saved as a PDF. Here are some resources for today's presentation. As you know, the RCO website includes a lot of useful resources, including several guidance documents that may assist you in determining whether your project meets the definition of human subjects research. The human subjects research determination form can be found on our website, and it is also linked in the eProtocol application as a hyperlink on the attachments page itself. We have also included the University Privacy Office website, as they can address questions regarding protected health information and HIPAA outside of human subjects research. These are the references for today's presentation. And for questions following this presentation, you can contact Allison or me using the email or phone number listed here. Are there any questions? I know there are.
Thank you so much,
Yes,
Dianne. Really
yeah.
appreciate it. And we will open the floor for questions. And as
Okay.
Allison mentioned, some were already in the chats. So she will bring them up.
Okay.
Please go
Yes,
ahead, Allison.
thank you. Thank you. So our first question is, can you please discuss how do you define generalizable knowledge as mentioned in the research definition and differentiating this from a QA/QI project? So I'll take this one, Dianne. This is a great question. Okay. This is a topic of national discussion. There is no federal definition of generalizable knowledge. So because of that, each institution or medical center across the country has to interpret what they feel is generalizable knowledge. And a lot of times the consensus is information that relates to information that's intended to expand a knowledge base of scientific discipline or some scholarly field of study. So QA/QI projects don't typically produce information that expands a knowledge base of a scientific discipline or another scholarly field, as the intent is typically to improve a very specific program. However, as Dianne mentioned in case study 7, some QA/QI projects are so large that sometimes they may be able to produce generalizable knowledge. So if you feel that the project could produce generalizable knowledge, and you feel that your project could be published as research, then we would encourage you to submit an IRB application, because IRB oversight would be required. And it's also important to remember the intent of the project. So if your intent is QA/QI, you can only publish as QA/QI. If your intent is research to kind of expand the knowledge in your scientific discipline, then you can only publish as research. So just something to consider when you're designing your project. Hopefully that answers your question. Dianne, we have a second question in the chat. Can you elaborate what you meant that information cannot be both de-identified and also coded?
Yes. So de-identified protected health information is a data set that removes all of the 18 HIPAA identifiers. And there may be additional statistical analyses that UIT people do to the data set depending, but typically speaking, a data set that has the removal of 18 HIPAA identifiers is considered to be de-identified data. When those identifiers are removed and replaced with a code, then the data are coded data. They are not technically de-identified. Even if that code is not indicative or relates back to the original participant. Of course, people are encouraged to use random number generated codes or any sort of simple code that does not include a person's initials or date of birth or anything like that. So if there is a generic code that links back to fully identifiable data, then the coded data is considered just that, coded. I hope that answers the question.
And just to piggyback on Diane's response, de-identified data cannot be re-identified. If it's truly de-identified, there is no way that you should be able to re-identify that data, because there's no code that allows that re-identification.
Exactly. Another consideration in terms of coded data, there's a couple different types of coded data. There's coded data that links back to the original data set, where the key to the code is held by someone other than the investigator. And there are times when there are coded data that later on, the link to the code is broken. So the data may still be coded, but if there's no way any longer to link back to that original data set, then the data is safer in a way. It's a consideration that is that factors into whether human subjects research is being conducted or not. I hope that makes sense. Okay.
Okay. All right. It looks like the next question is, will there be a link to these slides? Susan, I can provide you a slide deck. I'm not sure where you will post it, but yes, we can certainly do that.
Yes, we will